Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your hosting tonight, Dan Sebastiano. I am joined by a champion, legend, and author. We'll be talking with his book tonight, the legendary Cowboy Scott Casey. Scott, how are you doing tonight?
Not bad. I live down here in Arkansas, and it's been raining like crazy. I was thinking about building an ark, but I wasn't real sure. But no, I'm doing fine.
So what goes on a wrestler's arc? Is that 2 of every championship, or how does that work?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
You said you were going to build an arc. I said, what goes on a wrestler's arc? Is that 2 of every championship? How does that work?
It would be, I guess. I don't know. But no, it's been raining here. I was talking to Hillbilly Jim today, and I said I pulled and for Polish people, I apologize, but I pulled a Polish deal. I went outside when it was raining so hard, and my car was so dirty. I had a mop and was working on it. He said, "You're nuts, you know that, Scott." I said, "Well, hell, it was something to do. I'm bored. I'm retired. I'm bored. What the hell?" No.
I hear you. That's funny. You know, you actually, it's a fun segue. You mentioned being retired. Are you involved other than your communications? Do you still keep in touch or keep in the loop with the modern products?
Not that much. And I guess I'm biased, but I'm biased because I enjoyed the old way of wrestling. And to me, it seems like when they get in the ring nowadays, they're starting out at 100 miles an hour and winding up at 1,000. I just, it's hard for me to grasp it, but the society says, "Hey, we love this." So you can't knock success. I'll put it to you that way.
You know, it's funny. A lot of the legends, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I forgot what I was going to say now. It's called a senior moment. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, what I was saying, we've had a lot of different legends on the show, and they've all said the same thing about the modern product. It's spot fest, bam, 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 100 miles an hour. Nobody starts with a lockup anymore. There's no, well, for lack of a better term, there's really no story. It's hard to tell a story in the ring like that, the in-ring psychology, when you're just move, bam, bam, bam. You never really get any kind of narrative going.
Yeah, you're right there. I tell you, I learned from the best. I mean, I learned from guys like the Funks, Dory and Terry, Bobby Duncombe, Dick Murdoch. These are names you may not remember. But anyway, they were greats at it. And you had to work very hard to get the people into your corner. And you had to prove yourself as a wrestler, and I tried to, I mean, I learned so many things. A typical thing, there was a man by the name of Lou Thez who was one time 7 times world champion.
Oh yes.
And I'm walking up to the curtains, and he's peeking through, and I said, "Lou, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm watching the matches." I said, "Lou, you're 7 times world champion. What the hell do you want to have? Why would you want to watch these guys?" He said, "Scott, and for all you young guys out there that want to wrestle, listen to this." He said, "You can always learn something from each match." He said, "You can also steal it and use it in your repertoire." And I never ever, that was 40 years ago. I never forgot it. And I thought, wow, what a piece of information that was, But nowadays, because they're starting out with a motorcycle and they're winding up with a Corvette in the ring. It's like I said, it's hard for me to grasp. But like I said, I'm not taking anything away from the young guys. They're making a lot more money than I ever made, and God bless them. It's a different way, but life's that way. It changes on a dime, and you either go with it or sit on the sidelines and watch it, And I don't watch it that much, but there's one guy I still like to watch, and that's Chris Jericho. And he's getting to be a little long in the tooth, but I mean, he's still doing it.
Yeah.
And anywho,
well, I mean, you got to respect
on that.
Chris Jericho's in his early
yeah.
40s, and he's still one of the best in the business. That's a testament to his abilities there.
Yeah. I always thought he was very good.
If I can actually expand on something you had mentioned, you talked about moves and the repertoire. You're always obviously been associated with the cowboy gimmick, and we've had you, and we've had Sam Houston, and we've spoken of others with like the Blackjacks and excuse me, Ron Bass and others. There's was always a plethora when I was growing up watching the territories. There was everywhere you looked, they had a cowboy. There has not been a real genuine cowboy gimmick in many years. Why do you think, or do you have any thoughts on why the idea of the cowboy wrestler kind of faded?
That's a good question, and I wish I could answer it. All I could say is I used to raise quarter horses. I could show you how to shoe one. I could show you how to give birth from a mare, and a lot of things that people won't understand, but they used to take it looked like an old cheese grater, but it was about a foot long. And what happens is horses' teeth in the back continually grow. And if you don't trim them down, you'll starve your horse to death. That's for all you want to be cowboys out there, so you'll know what I'm talking about. And I rode them and rode in rodeos and stuff like that. So I'd like to think that I was a cowboy, and I was real bow-legged until about 3 months ago, and I went in and had orthopedic surgery on my right knee because, you could have taken a greased pig and run between my legs. I was so bow-legged.
Oh, Jesus.
But I got it straightened out, and it's amazing what a straight leg looks like, especially on me.
Well, let me ask you something else. You were talking about the story you told about Lou Thez. You mentioned building moves and expanding your repertoire. Something I talked about when Sam Houston was on the show, Cowboy Sam Houston, was the Bulldog. Yeah. How he used it as a finisher. That was a move you were associated with as well. And I can think of at least 3 or 4 other Western cowboy themed characters that used that. What was it about the Bulldog that was drawn to the cowboy character, or was it the other way around? Were cowboy characters drawn to that move?
Well, I would say just sensationalism. You got a guy in a headlock, you run across the ring, and you jump up in the air. Both of you do it at the same time, and wham, you fall down, and you cover them 1, 2, 3. But it was just being sensational. It's just like some of these moves nowadays, like what's his name? God, I can't think of it. The stunner by Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the thing that I'm trying to, the big blonde-haired guy, he put the guy on top of his shoulders and twist him around and fall, and I can't remember. He worked for the WWE, and once in a while I'll have a brain fart and I won't remember what I'm talking about. But these guys did it. It was just sensationalism. It's just like anything. If you do it long enough, people are going to believe in it, and they're going to go, "Wow, here he goes. He's going to do the Bulldog, or he's going to do the Stunner, or whatever." And that's what it is. It's just you have to get the people on your side, and the way you do that is being believable as much as possible and doing them over and over again, Just like my mom said, "Oh, you're going to learn to like spinach." Well, hell, I never did, but I told her I did. But I still tried to eat it anyway, and people believed it. My mom believed in it, and I did, But it's just, that's what it is. You're being repetitive.
Well, let me ask you something. Talking about winning the crowd with moves, something that's very common in today's product, and it's something that's a lot of people have criticized, is matches today will have numerous false finishes and moves. You mentioned the Bulldog, the DDT is another one, super kicks that were once nobody kicked out of end of the match. You'll have 5, 6, 7 of them in the same match now, and they're transition moves and there's kickouts. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on, you talked about winning the crowd and believability. As more and more moves become played off as non-impactful, does that start to kill the believability of the fight you're watching?
Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, where do you go? once you've flown over the top rope and knocked down 4 or 5 guys, or picked a guy up and suplexed him out of the ring onto the concrete floor. I mean, where the hell do you go from that? You know, it's just like if you scientifically think, I guess scientifically may not be the word, but anyway, if you do something, it's like I used to tell kids when I was teaching them to wrestle. You know, you'll see guys that'll get in there and they will cover somebody 1, 2 and a half. Why not start out the match and go 1, let the guy kick out because he's still fresh. He just got in there. There's not any sweat on him yet.
Right.
And then you go 1, 2, and you build it up to 1, 2 and a half, or 1, 2 3/4. But people don't think of that. I mean, young guys don't think of that nowadays. Or at least I haven't seen them do it. But that's just the way I felt about it.
That's actually a really good point, because that goes to what we were talking about earlier with the ring psychology. Something I used to notice, I should say I notice now compared to the older product, was pins. When you guys were wrestling and the older days, the pins looked also believable. It looked like the person making the cover was genuinely trying to hold the other guy down. Whereas nowadays it's a little more lackluster. Like you said, it's, a minute into the match and it's a 2.5 kick out, and it just doesn't have the same story. I'm curious then, do you think that that's one of those things they could transition back to, or is the damage already done?
If I was a booker and I was the owner of a company, I would damn sure make sure that you went back to that, because like I said, where do you go once you've gone 1, 2 and 4/5 and the guy barely kicks out? Where do you go from there? Unless you do something devastating like a pile driver or something like that. And then, but you've got to be as believable as possible without killing one another. And
right.
I can say that from doing that. I mean, I wrestled a guy by the sheepherder, Luke. Great guy. Great performer, and we're in the ring in a little town called Copperas Cove, Texas, and it's hot in the summertime, and we're sweating. I got him in a sleeper hole. We both went through the ropes and hit the floor. Now, we're both around 240, 250, and when we hit, my collarbone popped out on my shoulder. A collarbone is not supposed to do that. I mean, you're right. I don't know what part of the arm is right there with the collarbone, but I mean, I turned my head and I touched my collarbone with my chin, and it's just you can imagine how that was. But I mean, doing something like that, and the people are going to go, "Wow, well, that didn't hurt." Well, shit, it did hurt, and
right.
But you just have to, like I said, make it as believable as possible, but sometimes they have to go to the extreme, and that's what it was with us. I did the same thing. I wrestled Dory Funk Jr. for the world title. We locked up. Now, first, let me back up and say they probably don't do this anymore. 2 out of 3 fall matches. This was the opening move of the first fall. And he snapped my little finger on my left hand, and it's laying down beside my hand. I mean, it's just dangling there. He won that fall, went back to the dressing room, and there was an old-timer by the name of Wahoo McDaniels, one of the meanest, toughest, roughest son of a bitches you'll ever meet in your life. Folks, if I'm cussing too much, I'm sorry, but I get excited. But anyway, he told me, I'm sitting there, and I'm moaning and groaning, and Danny, I'm telling you, it hurt all the way up my arm and down my side and made my stomach come. Yeah, I almost threw up. It hurt so bad. And he told me, he said, "Scott, did anybody ever tell you had to do this for a living?" I'm going, "No, oh, good." And he said, "Well, shut the fuck up." I said, "What?" He said, "You can find sympathy alphabetically in the dictionary between shit and syphilis."
Syphilis. Yes, sir.
That was 45 years ago, and I never forgot it. And believe me, fellas, back then, we didn't have the doctors. We didn't have the stuff that these guys have nowadays, and I'm not complaining for it. I mean, everything advances. things get different and people do things different, and they have doctors now. I couldn't believe that. I was in Vegas and they had 2 of them there.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no doctors there when old Scotty was sitting there crying the blues. But that's just the way things are.
Well, since
it
we're
evolves, it gets tough.
Oh, that's
ahead.
too funny. No, I was saying, since we're on the topic, Karen McDaniel is a friend of the show. She's been on several times, and she's had a lot of good stories. And it's funny talking to anybody who's wrestled before. It really seems like before 2000 has some story tied to Wahoo McDaniel. I'm curious. Do you have any other good Wahoo stories?
Brother, I've got so many Wahoo stories. He and I lived together in a condo in San Antonio for a couple of years. As a matter of fact, he called me up to come down there to wrestle for Joe Blanchard. So I went down there, and Wahoo had this stigma about him. If a little bit was good, then a whole bunch is great. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
One night after the TV taping, we went to Diamond Gems. It was a bar that we always hung out, and all the wrestlers came, and all the fans came. And we would sit there and get leisurely shit-faced. But anyway, one night I was with Neil Mascaris and Tom Jones and Wahoo. I look around, Wahoo's gone. Where the hell? I asked Bill and I asked Tom. They said, "Oh, I don't know." And somebody said, "Oh, he went out the door real quick and got in his car and raced off." We had to get somebody to bring us home. So we get to the house. Honest to God, folks, as I am breathing and talking to you, this happened. He had a black Cadillac with Wahoo on it. The front door was opened. The engine was running, the lights were on, but there's no Wahoo in the car, and the front door of our condo is open. And Karen, if you are listening to this is the gospel truth. We walk in, and there's 3 piles of foam. And I almost stepped in one, and then I realized there was shit underneath one of each of them. I go to the bathroom. This is the truth, brother. I swear on God's green earth, I swear this is the truth. I go in the bathroom, and we had one of those showers that had a glass door, and it was shut, but his boots, his pants, and about $300 was floating in the water. It was still going. And I'm hollering. Now I'm really worried. I'm hollering, and I find Wahoo. Here's a 280-pound man under the bed, not in it, not by it, but under it, and he's curled up in a ball. And I said, "What the hell did you do?" "Oh," I said, "I'm too damn fat. I had to lose some weight." I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "I took, 2 Lasix shots and 3 Phenomen." Now, if you don't think that'll do something to your bowels, I guarantee you, try it sometime. I laughed, and we called this gal that was a friend of ours that was a nurse, and she came on. She said, "You stupid son of a bitch, you could have killed yourself." "Yeah, but I wanted to lose some weight." If a little bit's good, a whole bunch is great, and that's the damn truth, And the only one alive now is Mascaris, but he would tell you that if he was here. But he lives in Mexico. But
right.
Oh, it was so funny.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But he was that way. I mean, he would always do something silly like that. We down in South Texas, they have white-tailed deer, and he shot one, and the deer's twitching. He said, "Grab that son of a bitch and put it." I said, "You grab it. It's bleeding all over the place." He grabbed it, and by the time he got that deer in the trunk, it looked like he was in a knife fight, and the only one didn't have a knife. It was blood all over it. Oh, so I don't know if she knows that story or not, but it's the damn truth. I swear. I've got so many
hilarious
stories on Wahoo. Oh, another quick one. It's New Year's Eve, and we're in Harlingen, Texas. Excuse me?
Go for it.
Yeah. We're in Harlingen, Texas, and that's the tip of Texas. Coming back, we're pissed because we had to work on New Year's Eve. Anyway, Wahoo had a 5th of vodka, and I had a 5th of Jack Daniels, and we're drinking like crazy. And back and forth. He was always calling me MF all the time. Never said Scott. It was always MF, you know. And but, you know, what are you going to do for a guy that was a linebacker for the Dallas Texans and the New York Jets? I'm not going to fight him. Hell, he'd kill me. But anyway, he popped me with that big chest, and I reached over. When I did, I grabbed his gold chain and broke it.
Oh,
well, the
no.
shit was on. So we were back tearing each other's clothes off. He's driving down the road doing about 80, and here's Tom Jones in the back going, "Oh, Lord, oh, God, we're going to die, oh, Lord." I laughed, and by the time we got back to the condo, neither one of us had any clothes on. My pants were ripped off, his shirt, and his sweater and was ripped off of his pants, and we didn't care. We were so drunk we could have cared less, but that was just the way we were. That's just some of the silly things that we did. You just have no idea. We had more fun with that man. I mean, he was a great guy. I loved him to death, and I miss him. But they don't make them like that anymore. Another thing real quick. You're bringing back a flood of memories here. You remember Joe Namath?
Yes, sir.
The quarterback for the Jets?
Yep. Broadway
Wahoo
Joe
was there, and he hated he hated Namath, and he'd make him stand outside the shower and hold his towel till he got through taking a shower. Then he'd let him in there and do it. He was a crazy man, honest to God.
That's too funny.
I could go on and on and on, but I won't. You're bringing back a lot of memories here when we're talking, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, while we're on the topic of memories, this is just a personal inquiry for me. When you were with the still under the NWA banner, you had a pretty good run, storyline, whatever you want to call it. You ended up winning the tag titles with Mike George. Mike George was always one of my favorites watching the old tapes. Do you have any good stories related to him? That's personal curiosity.
Well, the only thing I can tell you is the man ate like he was starving to death all the time. I never saw anybody could put that much food down their gullet. I mean, he was like about 6'1" and about 260 pounds when we were wrestling, and big, mean son of a bitch. But I mean, he was a great wrestler and had the most infectious smile you'd ever see on a person. And I talked to him in Charlotte before this virus came up at what they called the Gathering, and God, I tell you, I said, "We got old, didn't we?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But I'm still trying to." I am too, but I'm not doing a very damn good job of it. But I mean, Mike is a great guy, great. I think he still lives in Kansas City. I'm not sure, Kansas, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, speaking of, you were talking about the stories you had all traveling and everything. I'm curious. There's a product today that the WWE did. I don't know if they still do. Truth be told, they called it Road Trip. They would record wrestlers in their cars driving to and from events and the conversations. And I'm pretty sure it was all scripted, but it was supposed to be candid and everything. We've had a lot of guests on that have shared, like you did, some crazy road trip stories. I'm curious, do you think the guys today could have survived the way the road was back in the territory days?
Well, they might have survived, but they damn sure wouldn't have made the money they're making now. I guarantee you. You know, I mean,
right.
Hell, there were times there when we traveled 200-300 miles and make a $25 payoff. Now you got to be out of your goddamn mind to do something like that, but we loved it. We loved the business. I mean, right. I did, you know. But as far as road story, quick one, another one with Wahoo. We had wrestled in Corpus Christi, and there was a hurricane or something, like a tornado or something came through there, and the weather was crazy. It had been raining like crazy. And we're heading back to San Antonio, and down there they have mile markers, and I think it was 168, 167, something like that. But we come up over this hill, and you could see all different colors of light of the spectrum shooting up in the air. You know, and they call it the hill country because that's the way the roads are. It's kind of hilly. And we came up to this mile marker. once again, I swear to God, this happened, and the only one alive to tell it now would be Mil Mascaras, because Tom Jones and Wahoo are dead. We look out in the field, Danny, I swear, and it had to be as long as a trailer. It was a UFO hovering up over the ground, and the lights were going around it, shooting up in the air. And Wahoo says, I think I'll stop and see if we can book him on the next show. I spoke up. I said, you do, and I'll leave your fat ass right here. I swear to God. And honest to God. And Wahoo, Tom Jones and Mascaras talking in Spanish, and Wahoo's going, Tom Jones was going, oh, Lord, oh, Lord. I think about it now. It's funny. But, back then, it was a UFO. What the hell else would be hovering off the ground in a field, And the next time we came down there, I looked at that mile marker. There was nothing there, just cows and trees and shit like that. But it happened. Only with Wahoo would something like that happen.
That's crazy. Well, going off of the travel, the territories. That's. You mentioned traveling hundreds of miles for a small payoff. We've had guys on, Magnum TA was on the show not that long ago, and he said his first full year on the road, he wrestled something like 500 matches in a year. What the schedules today, even with the insane amount of broadcast, just the WWE has something like 7 hours of television a week. You're still not reaching that schedule. You might be on the road, but you're certainly not wrestling 300, 400, 500 matches a year. What drove? You talked about the love for the business. How does one get into that? How do you go from, say, like you talked about football and being being a literal cowboy to thinking I'm gonna beat the crap out of myself a couple hundred times a year for $30? Like how does that happen? What mindset puts someone in that?
Well, I think maybe you got to be out of your damn mind to do it, because why would you want to go 300 or 400 miles for $25 or $30 payoff? Nowadays, guys wouldn't even get out of bed for that kind of money. But
Right.
They did then. It's just, I don't know. You get the fever. I guess that's the best way I could put it. You get the fever where, man, I want to learn how to do that. And, and I did. I can remember watching wrestling in a little town called Borger, Texas, up in North Texas, and watching guys like Dory Funk Sr., Bob Geigel, Art Nelson, the old-timers, and thinking, man, that would be fun. And then when I went to high school and then to college, and I met Terry Funk, and he said, "Do you want to do this for a living?" He said, "Would you like to learn how to wrestle?" I said, "Sure." And it just, you get the fever, you get the itch, or I don't know, you're addicted to it. I guess would be the best way to put it. And you just, no matter what comes up, you do it. A prime example, and I've got it on tape, and you can probably see it. Like I said, I raised quarter horses, and I had these 20-gallon buckets. We put feed and water and stuff in them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what we did, we had an angle where we filled this bucket full of horse shit, and a few of the guys relieved themselves in it too. And the angle was, I'm up talking to Steve Stacks, the announcer, and Bobby Jaggers comes up there, and he starts bad-mouthing me, and he hit me in my left ear. He's right-handed, so bam, caught me in the left ear. It blew my eardrum out.
Ooh.
And I had constant, and I still do have constant tinnitus, whatever it is in my ear.
Tinnitus.
And I can't hear out worth the damn. Yeah. Anyway, we did that, and we had this bucket of horse shit there. And I reached up, and I wouldn't have done it, but he did for the money, because we knew we were going to make great money on it. I dumped it on top of his head. And I don't think any other wrestler in the business then or now has ever done that. Now, if they have, you can correct me. But it was we lit up the airways like you could not believe. I mean, Jaggers had blonde hair, and it was just covered. I mean, covered him in it. And Steve Stack had to go change his suit because it stunk so bad. I mean, honest to God, so it just, I don't know where I was going with that, but that happened.
That's so great. Well, it's funny. We had the show we recorded a couple of days ago was a celebration of Bruno Sammartino's life. And some of the stories that came up during that was about the realism, like everything looked real, felt real. And the crowd reaction. There was talk of fans that were, I don't want to say maybe genuinely involved, but I remember watching the tapes as a kid, and if you put your hands on Ricky Morton or some of these other faces, fans would jump the barrier, and you had that click, and you heard stories about like the Jim Cornette still loves to tell the story about the Midnight Express had to start getting to the arena in police cars because fans would slash the tires of their rental. You don't have that. I'm wondering. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you got to try to get as real as you can. You get to the edge, and you try not to go over the edge when you're doing it. It's just like you mentioned Jim Cornette. What a great guy he is, and a great manager, and a great talker. Oh, unbelievable. We shot an angle where I took he was doing something and yelling at me for being drugstore cowboy or something. And finally I had enough of it. And I yanked his green jacket off of it. And we were out at my place, and I wiped my horse's ass with it. And it lit up the airway. The damnest thing. Jeez. But I mean, you got to go as far as you can to try to make the people come back. You're not going to pay to see empty seats in the Coliseum. They want to fill them up as much as possible.
That's too funny.
That's that.
Well, before we recorded tonight, one of the things we talked about is obviously you came on, you were going to talk about your book. As we transition into the second half of the show, I wanted to get into that. How does that come about? What drove you? What motivated you to write that book?
I met my dear friend and agent, confidant, and he and I were talking, and he said, you should write a book about some of these things you said. And I thought about it, and about a year later, after we had kept confining in each other and talking, he lives in Bristol, Connecticut. I'm down here in Arkansas, and we got it together, and it's called One Last Ride, The Tale of Cowboy Scott Casey. And it's like I tell people, I did not throw any of the guys under the bus. I could have caused a lot of divorces, but I didn't. I kept my mouth shut and didn't do it. And because why? Just to prove that you can be a real ass from talking about people? No. I had enough funny stories like what I've told you to cover 250 pages in a book. And that's how it all came about, And Nick and I talk every day. And if he's listening to this, I hope your daughter has a great birthday. But anyway, it just, that's how, we got to doing it. And the more we got involved in it, the more enthusiastic we were about telling my stories and stuff, I mean, you figure for over 20 years, you better have a bunch of stories, right? Well, I do. Right. I mean, I talked about so many guys, and, there were good guys, there were bad guys, there were stupid guys, there were smart guys, there were guys that did drugs or guys that drank, and there's, I didn't do drugs. I drank my fair share of beer, but, no one's perfect. That's the way I put it. But like I said, I did not put anybody under the bus. In my book, if you have an aversion to cursing or awkward situations, don't buy it because you're going to get them.
Right.
You had a bunch of grown men raising hell, chasing women, jumping over fences, whatever. Don't get it if you don't like that. But if you do, it's so entertaining. We had so much fun doing it, and I'm very proud of it. One last ride, the tale of Cowboy Scott Casey.
Well, to kind of expand on the book a little bit, you touched on, obviously it's full of your road stories and your event stories. You just in the last half hour we've been talking, just so many memories. How do you pick when you go to write your thoughts down like that? How do you pick what stories, obviously other than what you mentioned with trimming the fat to avoid getting anybody in trouble? How did you pick what stories ended up in there?
What I did was, I went from territory to back then it was territory to territory to territory, and things that happened in each one of these territories, if it was funny or unusual or different, I put it in there. But like I said, I didn't throw anybody under the bus, never will. But oh God, we had more fun. I'm wrestling Ivan Koloff, the Russian Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's the main event, and I've been in the business maybe, 6 months, and I'm about to pee all over myself, worried I'm going to do something wrong. We get out there, bing, bang, boom, and all of a sudden he says, Scott. I said, what? He said, I forgot the finish. I said, well, here's what we do, bing, bang, boom. And after that, he gave me the rest of the match, but he won because he was the champion. And but it's just things like that happen, It's just I wrestled a guy, they called him Jack. I can't think of his last name, but that's only been 40 years ago. But anyway, we were in an 18 by 18 ring. Normally they're 20 by 20. And, you always try to take care of the other guy. And
right.
I gave him a backdrop, went over the top of me, came down, his heels or feet caught on the top rope, landed him on his head, knocked him out colder than a wedge. And I looked at Stu Schwartz. He was the referee. I said, what do I do? I said, I never won. He said, cover him. I said, okay. And that was my first win. But the guy he said, it's my fault. I'm sorry.
You injury lucked yourself into your first actual win in a ring? That
was it. I knocked him out colder than a wedge, but it was his fault, it was a smaller ring, and when he went up high, guys like I used to say, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And then you can turn around and say, it's not how you do it, it's what you do. But I mean, they kind of intersect with each other. But guys, try to always, the great bump takers could do things you cannot believe. Prime example, Ray Stevens, an old timer. One of the great wrestlers of all time. He would do a thing. I threw him into the turnbuckle, and he would go in, and he would, like he was doing a front flip, and catch the top rope, and it's like a flip, and come up, boom, stand on top of the turnbuckle. And I've never seen very many guys do that. And it's just the sensationalism. They want the people to come back because they're paying our salary. Right. Whether you guys out there are listening, believe it or not, one move I did, I'll never forget. Ernie Ladd, great big guy, 6'9", was one of the first football players for Kansas City Chiefs when they went to the Super Bowl. I always like to tell that. But, I mean, he showed me how to do what they call a hangman. And, brothers, you don't want to do this unless you are very confident in your body. He threw me in the rope, and I picture you hook the second rope with your left hand and the top rope with your right, and you do a cartwheel, and you come up with, you're hooked in you're being hanging yourself. And believe me, if they don't get you out of it, you'll pass out. You won't know where you're at. You'll be late for dinner, but I'm guarantee you. But this was one of the things that Ladd told me. He said, don't do it unless you absolutely have to, because it's not a move for many guys to try. And it really wasn't. But that was then. Boy, you bring back a lot of memories talking to me. I'm telling you.
Hey, that's the best thing to have is the good stories. That's what we strive for. You know, actually, speaking of good stories, you mentioned when you were on the road, you traveled a lot. Did you have I hate to sound cliche, but did you have like a favorite territory or an area you always tried to get back to?
San Antonio was great. And a road story, I'll tell you a quick one. It was me, Ricky Romero, Ivan Putski, and Tony Atlas.
Oh, nice.
And between the two, between Atlas and Putski, their arms had to be 22, 23. You know, Hogan's talking about the 23-inch pythons. Well, shit, these two guys had the same thing. But anyway, we're leaving Odessa, Texas, and we're coming back to San Antonio. And it's about 340 miles anyway the crow flies. We're coming back, and we had rented a Lincoln. We always rented a car. Bam, we get a flat tire. And I went, oh, shit. So we get out. We're in the middle of nowhere. You could hear the cows mooing, you know, down there in South Texas and stuff. We get out of the car, the back right tire. I open up the trunk. There's a spare tire. There's the ratchet to take the bolts off, the lug wrench. But there's no jack.
Oh, no.
Now, what do we do? Out there, the goddamn cows are going on and every birds are coming across. Anyway, I looked at Tony and I looked at Ivan and I said, you guys think you can lift this back in? Well, thank God the engine is up in front. This was in a Lincoln back in the 70s. Sure. They said, just don't, you know, stop for coffee when you're putting that tire on. And they picked up the back end of the car. I slammed the tire on. We took the lug wrench and got the bolts back in, and away we went. I thought, I can't imagine too many human beings that could pick up the back end of a Lincoln Continental.
Right, especially I mean,
but these son of a guns, that's a lot of weight still.
Oh, yeah,
but,
heavy steel frame
God.
and everything.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We did it. You know, another story.
Of course. You
know, yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's actually funny. For the Texas, you know, people talk about territories and they mention, like, they'll say Carolina, they'll talk about Florida with Eddie Graham and all. People tend to underestimate just how big Texas is. When you say Texas alone had more territories than most of the South. I'm curious, how different how different was it? You know, you hear stories about Amarillo and you hear stories about San Antonio and Houston. How different would the Texas territories, or did they all kind of have the same, for lack of a better description, Texan flair?
Well, it's just kind of like Moose Borowski, another big Canadian buddy of mine, said one time, he said, when I first started, he said, Scott, you're going to make $2,500. I thought, shit, a week. I thought, damn. I've never made that much kind of money in my life. I'm greener than goat shit. I don't know.
Right.
He said, no, I mean miles. And that was just in Amarillo. Now, picture this. You leave Amarillo, you go north, you go up to Colorado Springs, you down that night, and you go back over to Albuquerque to Mexico because you got to do a TV taping in the morning. And then after that, you either sleep over there or you go down to El Paso. Each one of these are anywhere from, I don't know, $250 to $350, and then from there down to San Angelo, another $250 or $300, and then you got to go back to Amarillo. So it was just miles. I mean, that territory alone was brutal. It was absolutely brutal, you know. But the other one was the Carolinas. When I got up there, we would go average almost 300 miles one way, and we, you know, it was just crazy. I have another funny story about it. The Carolinas. My dear friend who I talk to almost daily, Bruce Swayze, and I are riding back with Brute Bernard, and now Swede is 6'3" and about 340, and Brute was about 6'2" and about 290. And it's just, Brute was about, how do I put this lightly? He was about 4 cents short of a nickel in his head. And someone's trying to call me, but that's too bad. Anyway, he said, watch this. They used to have what they call blowouts. Every time after you left the matches, you'd go to a 7-Eleven, pick up bologna and cheese and mayonnaise, mustard, pickles, tomatoes, onions, whatever, and eat on the way home. Bruce, it's kind of hard, Brute and Bruce, but anyway, Bruce was asking Brute, are we home yet? No, monsieur. He was French-Canadian. He must have asked him 25 times by the time we left the 7-Eleven until we hit the city limits of Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. And we got on down the road. And finally, Brute had enough, and he's making the sandwiches. He throws everything up in there, and we were in one of these old station wagons that Swede had. He said, "I kill you, cocksucker!" And he's coming over the back seat, and Bruce is getting out of him, and I'm laughing, and Swede's laughing, and Swede finally had to stop the car, get out, grab Brute off of Bruce, and I said, "Bruce, if you open your mouth again, you're going to be a dead man." He said, "Are we?" And I slammed my hand in front of his mouth. I'm laughing, and we get back in the car. The funniest thing about that, besides that, we're going down the highway, and about, less than a mile, Swede slams on the brakes. He said, "I'm going to kill all three of you son of a bitches." I said, What? He said, "My teeth." He had false teeth, and he had them on a napkin, and he was drinking wine, and he loved to sing songs. Anyway, we back up going down the freeway backwards, doing about 80, and cars are passing us. I'm going, we're going to die. We get there, and there's his teeth out on the highway. Nobody had run over him, and I thought, God, thank God. How are you going to get away from a 6'3", 340 or 50-pound man, Oh, but that was so funny. And every once in a while, I'll say to Bruce, "Are we there yet?" And he'll just crack up laughing about it. Oh, funny. But things like that happen all the time. You were singing songs or drinking or getting drunk or whatever, but it was fun. But nowadays everybody catches a plane or a train or whatever, but it wasn't that way when we were doing it, But
you mean you guys all didn't have your
stories.
own private tour buses and first class and everything?
Yeah, and I can fly too. No, I wish.
Well, the Carolinas, obviously you mentioned Norfolk. That's where I'm recording from. So a lot of good wrestling memories here. How do you tell us that in that story, put us in that mindset. You were wrestling in Texas. How does a territory guy from Texas get himself booked to wrestle in the Carolinas?
Well, I made good friends with the owners and bookers there in Texas, and it was Dory Funk Sr., and he had talked to Jim Crockett. He said, "Look, I got this young guy that he'll work hard for you and all this," and they brought me in. That's how I got there. I didn't know anybody was there, and I learned from some of the greats there in the Carolinas, guys like Tim Woods, Mr. Wrestling, or Johnny Walker, Mr. Wrestling 1 or 2, whatever. And let's see, I'm trying to remember some of the other. Johnny Valentine.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you've had any real stories about this man or not.
That
he
name
was unbelievable.
That name's come up on this show a few times. His name's come up on this show a few times. A lot of people have some good. Now,
and I've been in the business maybe a year, and George Scott was the booker, and we're standing back, and I'm supposed to wrestle Johnny Valentine, and he said, "Scott, do you know?" Now, and I'm getting ready to go out to the ring. He said, "Do you know anything about Johnny?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, fight for your life," and pushed me through the curtains. I went, "Oh, what happened? The word work? Oh, hell." I get out there. Now, here's a guy, 6'3", 250, and I'm 6 foot and I don't know, maybe 230, 240. Johnny loved to waffle the crap out of you. I mean, he wouldn't hit you in the groin or in the face or anything, but he would beat you with his right hand. I mean, wham, in the stomach and the back and everything like that. And I thought, man, he knocked me out of the ring, and I'm laying on the apron. I thought to myself, by God, I'm 1,500 miles from home, and I don't give a damn how big this man is. I'm not going to let anybody beat the shit out of me without giving them a receipt. I got back up on the apron, and John's got his back to me in the ring, and he's talking to Angelo Martinelli, the referee. Mm-hmm. I reached over and grabbed John's long blonde hair, and I'm telling you, Danny, I hit this man so hard his knees buckled.
Oh no!
And you know what he did? He turned around and he went, "I love it. I love it." I don't know. I think it's sadomasochism. He loved to be hit.
Oh man!
But after that, he was as light as a feather to me. But he just wanted to see if I had enough guts to stay in there and work with it, because he knew I was young and green, you know. And after that, I had his respect. Anytime we wrestled after that, no problem. He just wanted to. Back then, the old timers would do that. They're going to beat the shit out of you and see if you could take it or not. And that's just the way it was. I don't know if they do that nowadays, but they did back then. You know.
Not so much.
Now I had a guy by the name of Frank Morrell, about 6 foot, buggy whip arms, pot belly, but could beat you to death in a heartbeat. And he told me, he says, "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to shoot you off. You're going to crisscross, drop down, go to hip toss me. I'll grab your arm, blah, blah, do a backslide and all this other crap." And I missed part of the spot. And wham, he started beating on me. He says, "You either remember what we're doing, or I'm going to break your nose." I said, okay, I'll learn. And he gave me a high spot that was twice that long. Believe me, I remembered every bit of it. You know, you just gotta think on the fly a lot of times. You know, but back then, if you didn't do it right, you're going to get your ass kicked because they didn't want to look bad. And
right.
That's just the way it was. But
call it in the ring,
like
as they
you
say.
said, now you don't. Yeah. But it's crazy. I mean, they don't do it that way nowadays, and so be it. And they make a lot more money than I ever made, so be it. You know, if that's what they want to do.
You know, it's final thought as we wrap up here. You mentioned money a few times. Do you think that that's played a part in the quality of the product, that you have guys becoming wrestlers today to get rich more than guys becoming wrestlers today because they love the business?
Well, that's kind of a hypothetical question, because I really don't know. I'd have to sit down with a few of them and see what their thoughts are. I mean, everybody, let's face it, everybody wants to be somebody or something that's sensational. You know, you see it in football and basketball and in wrestling. You know, these guys are doing things. There ain't no way I'd get up there and let somebody do something that they do. But I guess it's just sensationalism. You know, they want to, you know, you wanted to be an announcer or whatever else you do for a living. You know, you enjoy doing it, and so be it. You know, and that's just the way I look at it.
Well, that's a good point. You know, I'll tell you, this has been great. I mean, I'm glad I was able to. You gave me the credit for bringing back some of those memories. I'm glad I was able to hear some of these stories. That's actually the if you've followed up on any of the reviews from your book, a lot of the positive feedback your book's gotten has been people just loving the fact that it's told like a story. It's somebody you'd sit down and have a beer with versus somebody trying to sell you something or, you know, pitch you a product.
Right.
So where I'll throw it to you here. Hype up. Obviously, we've hyped up the story. We've talked the book. Where would you buy it? Where could you get it? Where's it sold?
Well, they can either go online and on Facebook, and they'll find, if they call me, I'll tell them, you know, it's $37.50. That's shipping, handling, and autograph, which brings it back down below $30. Anyway, and if they want to do that, I will be glad to, they send me the money, and I'll be glad to send them the books. I mean, I'm not out to scam anybody or do something stupid,
Mm-hmm.
So just, it's Scott Casey, and I'm 122 Del Rio Lane, Junction City, Arkansas, 71749. That's me. And if you want one, call me, write me, you can get on your cell phone and find me in there, and be glad to help you out. I just got down to my last book, and I've gotten ready to order some more. But I guess everybody likes it. I've had a lot of positive response from it. And like I said, I didn't do it to hurt anybody. I did it because I enjoyed what I did, and that was my life.
And there you have it. The book, of course, is One Last Ride by the legendary Cowboy Scott Casey. Scott, we are definitely going to have you back. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and we will definitely get in touch again. Thank you for all these stories and everything you've done for the business. I appreciate having you on tonight.
Thank you very much, and I got plenty more stories where those came from. I'll talk to you later. Have
Sounds
a good night.
Good night,
Dan.
Scott. Scott Casey, everyone. What a legend. What a story. I mean, that man can tell you some stories about the road. You've heard them. Again, the book is One Last Ride by Cowboy Scott Casey. He told a lot of stories tonight about taking care of the boys on the road and with his fun time with the boys on the road. Speaking of taking care of the boys, you can take care of your own boys with our sponsors at manscaped.com. Manscaped.com is the world's leading supplier of grooming products, male care products, and trimming products. Currently, their packaged lawnmower 3.0 includes a deodorant and a spray, both of which are wonderful. I can vouch for the products personally. Use promo code WrestlingFuture for 20% off your purchase at manscaped.com. That's manscaped.com and WrestlingFuture. At manscaped.com, your balls will thank you. Now, for those of us, that was a fun story. We are about to sign off here. We can be found Wrestling Future. We can be found on Wrestling with the Future on Facebook, Wrestling with the Future on YouTube. We are currently on Twitter at Wrestling Future. That's no G, Wrestling Future. And Instagram, Wrestling with the Future. For Scott Casey, I'm Dan the Man. This has been a great night. Happy wrestling, everybody.